Today, our speaker is Professor Dr. Farzaneh Soleimani Zoghi from SRH Berlin University of Applied Sciences. She's a professor of business administration and head of study program of international business and leadership. Personally, I'm very excited to hear your speech, Professor, particularly the earthquakes in Turkey underline the importance of providing developing resilient communities to respond disasters and other related risks. So now, without further ado, I now give the floor to you. And for your talk, we can give you 45 minutes for the talk. Then we will receive the questions from the audience. The floor is yours, professors. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much. I sometimes intentionally muting my voice because, as I said, I'm in a train. Yeah, you see this agility, flexibility, and digitalization has afforded this privilege to just travel and have a speech from Germany in Turkey. That's really interesting. Thank you very much for inviting me to this Panorama Talk. I'm also very excited to present my topic, and I'm looking forward to receive feedbacks and questions at the end. So, as you just introduced me, my name is Farzaneh Zoghi. I'm a professor of business administration with a focus on leadership at SRH Berlin University of Applied Science. We have different actually study programs regarding management and other fields, and I'm the head of study program for international business and leadership. So one of the favorite sub categories that I'm responsible for it is sustainability management as well. So I'm gonna to start actually my speech talking about some facts and figures based on the resources that I find it. Actually, I would appreciate if you just go to the next slide. Yeah, as you see, I have prepared a content for you. Then we start with an overview on Kahramanmaraş earthquakes, and then I'm gonna to talk about sustainable risk management framework. And within sustainable risk management, we talk about resilience, sustainability, and so on and so forth. And at the end, we close up the session with a conclusion and, of course, your feedbacks and questions. Let's go to the next slide, Leslie. Okay, this is the first section. So I'm going to start my speech by showing you statistics that I find it from Statista recently. And as you could see, this is the number of earthquakes in Turkey from 1990 to 2023. So, and as you could see, the numbers has increased at some years significantly. However, I believe by looking at this simple graph, you could see that earthquake is not something new in Turkey, and it's not a kind of surprising phenomenon due to geographical characteristics of the region. It's quite foreseen, and it's a kind of like a kind of normal, let's say, phenomenon, however, not in the dimension that recently has happened. So this is just something that from the beginning I can tell you. So we are not talking about something that is quite shocking, and it's just really, it's not a kind of case that you could foresee it. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, I find this information from a report. Let's say that the name is Global Rapid Post-Disaster Damage Estimation. And you know better than me what has happened. 6th of February 2023, we had two large earthquakes with a magnitude of 7.8 and 7.5. And it has happened in the southern region of Turkey and northern Syria. So they call, or they refer to this earthquake Kahramanmaraş earthquakes, because it's covering actually 11 provinces in Turkey, including cities like Adana, Adıyaman, Diyarbakır, and so on and so forth. So when you just Google as a tourist, just Google must to see in Turkey. And these names, the name of the cities that I just mentioned is popping up as must to visit as a tourist. So of course, this earthquake has a very sad aspects, like people that they died or they got injured or they got displaced. But as we have to focus on the topic like sustainability in this session, I'm not mentioning that aspects of actually damages that has happened. So I'm just focusing on the impact on tourism and hospitality, let's say. That's why I'm mentioning that if you Google these names, it's kind of really a big actually sorrow that the best places to visit in Turkey has been damaged due to this earthquake. So yeah, next slide is again some more information in more detail. As you see in the table in the left side, we can see direct damages relative to exposure per sector. So they have divided it to residential, non-residential, and infrastructure. And then you could see that 11 provinces that I was talking about. Okay, residential area, it's clear. It's not the focus in our actually, let's say, speech. Non-residential and infrastructure is something that we can discuss about hotels and roads, let's say airports and so on and so forth, that has been damaged. And as you could see, few cities, Hatay, Kahramanmaraş, and let's say Adıyaman, actually, these are the most impacted cities. So on the right side, you could see the same information with colors on the geographical map. So when we talk about tourism and hospitality, we include hotels and all infrastructures that make it possible for tourism to travel to the area, right? So you could already see the scope of damage in that sense. So let's go to the next slide. In the same report that I just told you, they have identified some factors that is impacted. It's saying something about the significance of the damage that has happened. Some of these factors, like the first one, juxtaposition of two very large earthquakes in the area. Yeah, that's absolutely something that human being cannot stop it, cannot do anything about it. It's just a kind of natural phenomenon. And as far as I know, none of the scientists in the world has already came up with a solution to stop a kind of earthquake or something like that. So this is probably in future, let's hope, for some developments in the future that they can maybe decrease the impact or something like that based on the natural facts itself. But then the three other factors that in the report they are mentioning as factors that has impacted the dimension of the damage. One is construction. Most of the building in that area has been constructed prior to 2000. However, since 1997 in Turkey, they are implementing a building code, but obviously it has not been taken into consideration seriously. And then the third factor even is more sad because Turkey has a kind of seismic building codes that they have noticed that lack of code compliances in designing, building, and the buildings, the construction. Actually, they have noticed that there is a lack of code compliances over there. And the last one that was quite surprising for me was saying that because in that specific area, they didn't have this phenomenon so far for a while, probably they weren't prepared for it. But it seems like, of course, in an area that you are exposed to this kind of issues might be naturally or more actually prepared for it. So when we look at these factors that has been reported, as I told you, the first one, I believe, still there is no solution for it. But for the 3 other factors, we could already see that human being actually error and ignorance, absolutely these are things that we could deal with it. Assoc, could you please go to the next slide? Yes. So what I can actually, based on just facts and figures that I got from this report and the news and everything that we are hearing, what I could just go for a conclusion, a simple, let's say, understanding of the situation. Like the obviously government, let's say, after looking at these numbers and the report, actually, I came up with this conclusion that obviously companies, I'm not even talking about government, however, we know that government is playing a significant role in handling the issues, but let's focus on tourism and hospitality and our actually favorite sector. Obviously, companies are not, they have not been prepared for the situation, and they have not anticipated the risk, and consequently, let's say they have ignored actually the fact that it may happen, and they weren't prepared. And the biggest part of damage is coming exactly from this point that they weren't prepared. Okay, let's. Okay, we talked about the problem, and we all have enough information about it. Let's talk about solution. Let's see what we can do to face these kind of challenges. Assoc, could you please continue with this slide? Okay, this is the second part that I'm going to introduce in my sustainable risk management framework, and then from there I can come up with some ideas. So when we talk about risk management, as I told you, I'm going to talk about sustainable risk management as not as a kind of like solution that could solve everything, but it has a kind of significant impact in preventing or reducing or limiting actually the damage itself. So let me just start with risk definition and risk management process for those participants that they do not actually have any background in this area. So how we can define the risk? Risk is about uncertainty. So whatever that we do not have information about it, it probably scares us because we don't know what may happen and we don't know what will be the situation. So let's call it uncertainties. But remember, uncertainties could be positive or negative. That's why they call it like risks and opportunities. So some of the things that we don't know may bring opportunities. Some of them may bring actually threats and so on and so forth. But if you look at the literature of risk and definition, mostly in literature, they have associated risk with negative actually consequences. And then how we can define risk management process as just a kind of systematic way of dealing with risks that are threatening or impacting our business. So predicting them, estimating them, and responding to them properly. That's what they call risk management process. And you could imagine that if you do this properly, it could really not guarantee, let's say, but could actually help you with a kind of sustainable long-term success and development, right? Next slide, please. Yes, what I'm showing you in this slide is what they call generic model of risk management process. And what you see in this framework, it has like 3 parts, 3 main parts, let's say. Risk assessment, risk mitigation, and risk reporting. So normally we start a risk management process by doing an analysis to identify, estimate, and profile the risks that is let's say, is impacting our business, and doing a kind of
We lost you.
oh, okay. What about now? Am I back?
Yes, yes, you are back.
Good, thank you. Yeah, when we target assessment, then as we said, we identify the risk, we estimate it, and we profile it, and then we look at the how they are impacting our business, that what they call risk evaluation, and then we decide, okay, what we should do with the risk. That's what they call risk mitigation. Shall we eliminate them? Shall we limit them? Shall we plan for them? Shall we transfer it, or shall we accept this risk? And then, of course, we are, according to the response, we are going to report it, and we are going to inform, actually, let's say, internal and external partners and shareholders regarding our activities. So in the whole process, we take care of strategic objectives and as ideal situation and what is happening right now in the company as current situation. And we are trying to look at the gaps, and we are trying to take some amending, or let's say, amending steps to fix actually the problem and to narrow down the gap itself. So when you look at this simple generic model of risk management, and our case earthquake, earthquake is not something that you can eliminate it, not yet. Maybe in future they can do that, but not yet. It's not something that you can limit the dimension of the earthquake. However, absolutely you can limit the impact or the scope of damage, in my opinion. Absolutely something that you can plan for it, because as we said, obviously the geographical characteristic of the region is saying that this is going to happen, because it has happened several times in the past time. Risk is transferring it to, let's say, partner, transferring it to where. That's a kind of case that probably is not relevant to earthquake case. And risk acceptance, that could be also a case as saying that, okay, what we can do, this is just a destiny, what God actually give us, what we can do. Yeah, we can accept it in that way, but again, as I told you, by accepting the general thing doesn't mean that we comply with everything. We can still manage it, I believe. So that's a basic generic model of risk management process that I showed you. Next slide, I'm going to give you more information, more detailed information about hospitality and tourism. When we talk about risk management, depend on which sector you are looking, they have identified specific type of risk that they are relevant to that sector. Now, when you look at the literature review of hospitality and tourism, you would see the model that I am showing you on the left side, and I got it from Baharwani and Matthew 2012. They have categorized risks that are the priority or the most important actually risks in tourism and hospitality. So as you see, they have divided in two levels, let's say internal and external risks. By internal risks, they mean operating risk, whatever that comes from operational side. And you could imagine that this is about the company and internal environment of the company. And the other risk, strategic risk, other external risks that they call it, and commercial and financial risks, they have put it in the category of external risks. It's probably very small, but if you look at other external risks, you could see that they have already foreseen terrorist activities, pandemic, and some force majeure natural disasters, and so on and so forth in other external risks. What you see in the right side, however, it's what me and my colleague Hannes Antonishmit from SRH, actually it's also my professor colleague, we have tried to rearrange the same model based on the priority, or let's say the layers. We selected this onion shape to show to show actually which one is internal, and then the layers goes to the external layers. So far we learned about risk management, we learned about type of risk in hospitality and tourism, we learned about risk management process, and then I'm going to take you to the next slide that is something that, we call it a sustainable risk framework for hospitality and organization. And this is something that originally we have created with my colleague, Professor Anthony Schmidt. And we have published this paper recently on 2000, actually, it should be 2022 that we publish it, but the framework actually we created on 2020. So looking at this framework, that we believe this is a kind of, let's say, a kind of comprehensive framework that could help companies to go through all type of risks. Looking at it, probably it's reminding you of some models that you have already seen some other places. Like obviously a part of this model has been adopted from shape-wise, of course I'm talking, is from Michael Porter value chain analysis. So what we have done here on the top of the model, you see, we are mentioning about different type of risks, and then we have divided the process to two levels: supporting activities and primary activities. And we believe that because risks are not happening one by one, so it's not a kind of linear relationship between risks that you start, for example, at one point you deal with one risk, you may have different type of risk in the same time, internally and externally, and you have to deal with all of them. That's why we put it on the top, and then, as you said, then we have this process. The top upper part of the model, supportive activities, is in general actually is dealing with all type of risks, and then at the bottom of the model we have primary activities that is specific about each different type of risk that we are talking about. And then on the right side of the model, we have two layers: independent hotels and chain hotels, because I don't know how much familiar you are with the hospitality industry, let's say, but we know they are independent, actually, companies that say hotels, a kind of family-run, small, actually, hotels. But then on the other side, we have chain hotels with big resources and money and expertise and everything, that they can deal with the same risk topic in really different, actually, level. So this is actually a model that we believe it could help. So now I'm going to connect my model with two concepts that you could see on the title: sustainability and resilience. So Asli, could you please go to the next slide? Very good. So, okay, look at this graph that I have created. You see risk management in the middle of two other concepts: sustainability and resilience. Without considering risk, you cannot have a sustainable in your business. As a factor, development without considering risk cannot be sustainable. Okay. If you look at the resilience part, you know what is risk is to prevent actually the disaster or the damage, and resilience is the time that damage is happening, and then now it's time to get back to actually the business, let's say. So it's a kind of post a kind of recovery step. So again, if you look at the resilience, a system that is effective in managing risk is likely to become more resilient to shocks and stress. Why? Because a system that is effective in risk management has already prepared itself to face the challenge, right? That's why I believe that risk management here is the connecting actually loop that can bring these two concepts, sustainability and resilience, next to each other. So, okay, now I'm getting again back to the point that we talked about sustainability and resilience, and now I'm going to have a more concrete actually concept here. In the same places that I had sustainability and resilience, let's say, I'm going to introduce some concepts that more concretely actually can deal with the problem. So in the center, we have disaster that has happened. Okay, what we can do to have a kind of sustainable development, a sustainable business, let's say, from the beginning, we have to incorporate sustainable practices. And I'm sure that you know what sustainable practices are. Let's say social, economical, and environmental actually practices that could already prevent this kind of disaster, like environmental actually issues. Implementing a sustainable risk management process is also another option. So as I just told you, a kind of sustainable risk management process could already foresee what may happen, and this process, ongoing process of monitoring it, can actually help with preparation. So these two concepts, they could actually act like a kind of preventing factors. And then on the other side, after disaster, we have this resilience. And concepts that could help in resilience is increase preparedness, reduce vulnerability, and reduce hazard exposure. But I'm going to actually talk about it a little bit more. What could be, for example, how to be resilient. And there are also some activities that you could do immediately when disaster is happening. Some activities like, let's say, for example, waste management, you know, when this kind of disasters in this dimension is happening. So we have a lot of waste over there, and they have to collect it, they have to they have to manage it, they have to actually transfer it, and also we have some other activities that is immediate is coming to the focus is like having a sustainable supply chain of managing the health and managing the situation at that time by having like, of course, when we talk about supply chain, you can look at it as a kind of short, immediate factor, as I told you, or you could just go to, oh, Asli, I think I forgot to tell you that we have to go to the next actually slide talking. Yeah, this is the slide that I'm talking about. So let's say, yeah, and then of course there are actions that we do before, during, or the time that this kind of disasters are happening, and afterwards. So if we just go to the next slide, because I explained it, we'll find more explanation about what I am actually showing with the graph. As we said, like we can go for sustainable practices, ecological, social, and economical well-being, economical factors that is not compromising actually the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. So we take care of environmental factors, we go for regulations. You just mentioned at the beginning of this presentation about environmental, social governance, and how countries, how governments, how the whole world, how people actually hand in hand, they try to increase the awareness about sustainability as a kind of long-term solution to prevent these kind of disasters. And of course, on the other hand, businesses itself, managers, leaders, which are having a kind of sustainable mindset, they are helping with the process. So let's go to the next slide. That this is probably the final thing that I'm going to tell you, and it's very interesting. I find this information from the same report. It was talking about, like, okay, in the resilience, or let's say disaster has happened, okay, you want actually to come up with resilience, and at the same time you're managing the disaster. There might be a kind of like special considerations for recovery phase. And I really liked the points that they have mentioned. Like, okay, you can easily say that, okay, we need to have a better buildings and so on and so forth. Yeah, sure, we have to, it's important, but you can imagine that it's going to take years. There are some immediate actions in the disaster time, and there are some long-term actions that we could go for post, let's say, recovery phase, like what we said about sustainability, like sustainable supply chain and so on and so on. But what you see in this report that I want actually to mention, it's interesting. It's like normally when we talk about a disaster, what it comes to mind, okay, fixing it as quick as possible. But since we are talking about the damage on human being, you could easily say that, okay, let's displace people, let's have better building and so on and so on. But emotional aspect of the issue has to be taken into consideration as well. Like, okay, what will happen to people when you displace them? Regarding their culture, regarding their habits, and so on and so forth. These are long-term, again, sustainable actually things that you have to consider. Another thing in this report is saying that, okay, natural disasters are impacting, actually, they are normally a kind of gender neutral or demographic neutral, it's impacting everyone. But in this report, they have noticed that no, it's not the case really, because the area that we are talking, it's attractive tourism, from tourism perspective, very attractive, but in the same time, very poor. So poor and it needs actually more support in that sense as well. And they have looked at, it's also very interesting that they have mentioned some experiences that is coming from COVID-19 pandemics, and they are saying that, okay, in COVID-19 pandemics, they have done research and they have noticed that this pandemic has impacted females more than males, gender-wise. They have reported more anxiety, and they have experienced more stress. So I could imagine that this type of natural disasters, like earthquake and so on and so forth, could also have more impact, like elderly people, women, children, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to mention these points because when we talk about, okay, disaster management, and I say resilience, very fancy words, very good, and it seems like it's very practical actually things in the same time. But we shouldn't forget about the long-term impact of any action that we do, any response that we take into consideration on people as residents of that area. So I believe, yeah, this is actually the last slide that I have. Honestly, I think, yeah, these are resources that I have used. I have just mentioned a few of them, the main one. And yeah, the last slide is, yeah, this is the last actually part of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And I'm very excited to hear about your feedback, your points. I know that lots of things is missing actually. Yeah, maybe you can help me in adding some points or the things that actually you believe it could also help with managing the situation.
Thank you for the enlightening talk, Professor Farzaneh. Even though they are among the driving sectors of Turkish economy, both tourism and hospitality are very vulnerable to risk. We have experienced during the COVID pandemic and now the earthquakes. So your speech is really enlightening for us, and I'm guess for the practitioner of the sectors to understand the link between sustainability, risk analysis, risk management, and resilience, developing resilient systems. So thank you for the speech. So we have one question from the audience. Then if we don't have any questions, I would like to ask a few questions to you. Ozan Savran asks, is there any kind of meaningful cooperation between international actors such as UN or other regional organizations and national entities that could have prevented this kind of damage? How can we increase the cooperation in the area of risk management?
Thank you very much. It's really a good question. Of course, when we talk about like cooperation between EU and other actually organizations in a bigger scope, then that's coming to policies and politicians and science. Yeah, again, you can go for politicians as one of the major factors that they are discussing the issues. Recently, for example, last day, I believe, it was a kind of conference. They were talking about the shortage of the water, for example. These kind of activities bring people together, and it increases the awareness about the issues. Environmental issues is happening in some part of the world. We have shortage of water, and on some part of other places, earthquakes. And it's all natural, actually, disasters. One issue that they are doing, actually, and of course, it's we can say that, of course, doing more is better, is having this kind of like conferences and bringing really people together to come up with some policies that could facilitate these kind of activities. On the other hand, we have scientists that they are devoting really their efforts on finding some solutions, like techniques and mechanisms that practically they use something. The time that we had Corona, for example, everyone could remember that it was a competition among the pharmaceutical industry to come up with the first actually vaccine and so on and so forth. I mean, maybe it was a kind of like, if we have the same feelings of the emergency and importance of the case, that scientists like get more budget on investing on doing actually research and coming up with some solutions that absolutely could help us with that. So how I can explain this question, we can refer to PESTLE analysis. I believe here, if we go to the widest scope of actually collaboration, we have to focus on PESTLE factors. If you remember the PESTLE factors, like political, environmental, and so on and so forth. If we look at these micro factors, all of them, they have absolute contribution in facilitating and encouraging actually these kind of activities to increase the awareness about it. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you for the answer, Professor. So I guess we don't have any other questions from the audience. So I would like to ask to compare the earthquake disaster in Turkey with the other natural disasters in other countries, in other parts of the world. There were many hurricanes, tsunamis. They destroyed the hospitality and tourism sectors in different countries. So, for example, Katrina hurricane in New Orleans, they destroyed the whole state in United States, and also destroyed the majority of the tourism sector in New Orleans, for example. So same goes for the Asia Pacific countries. They regularly facing the tsunamis, for example. So can you give us some examples or some sense that how they overcome these disasters, how they manage to develop their strategies to facing particularly natural disaster? They destroy the infrastructure, tourism infrastructure. COVID was a different kind of disaster, but it was different. It didn't really destroy the whole infrastructure as natural disasters did. Can you give a sense of what happened other countries' tourism sectors, and how they overcome this risk management and disaster management issues.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, absolutely. When we look at the cases that has happened, we have always some best practices, like countries like Japan, that they are R2T to actually go to this type of challenges. And we have majority of the world that unfortunately they have damaged significantly from their to these kind of natural disasters. Then again, sustainable development at the beginning actually is the case that you could differentiate actually countries accordingly. On the other hand, when a disaster is happening, let's say natural catastrophe, again, if we look at actually the cases, we have some of them that they have managed it very well. For example, recently I was reading about let's say a kind of like tsunami that happened in India. They what they have done over there with waste management, it was so effective and good that in case studies actually they are using it as one case to look at it. So we could always find this type of actually best practices with different type of disasters around the world. But you just mentioned Corona and COVID-19, and it's just taking me to the point. You're right. That was a kind of different type of actually things. It didn't impact infrastructure, but it impacted anyway the hospitality and tourism. And we were doing a research with my colleague, and we were running interviews with hotel managers to ask them what type of actually what type of actually risks are the most important in their opinion. That was very surprising. And I'm talking about Germany, right? We are talking about Germany as a country that normally we expect, because they are really perfect in planning and seeing everything ahead and so on and so forth. But still, when we did this research and we did this interview with majority of hotel managers, they were looking at operational risk only. The first thing that actually is coming to their mind when you ask which risks are threatening your business, immediately they will mention fire or food poisoning actually cases or something like internal factors. None of them, or not majority of them, they couldn't see wider level of risk, like for example strategic risk, like having a kind of strategic mindset to think about risk in a long term and in a wider scope. And even worse in countries like Germany, that they are blessed with a very stable and safe actually life, let's say, situation. They couldn't see and they couldn't believe at all that something like Corona may impact their business as well. They look at it from far away and something that absolutely is not going to happen to us. So you see, the way that I believe here the role of leaders is going to be very important. How they could see the things, how they could see the risk, and how they could prioritize the things. If in the report I was telling you, they have said that because this type of activities, let's say natural disasters, has not happened in the area of Kahramanmaraş for years, people weren't prepared for it. It seems like exactly this is not the case only with Kahramanmaraş. It seems like it's a kind of universal thing that we, unfortunately, we think things is far away from us and it's not going to happen to us. And when it's happening, we just get surprised. However, there are also facts and figures and evidence that if we just open our eyes, we use the technology, for example, now everybody's talking about AI, let's say artificial intelligence. What if we look at this type of things as priority and invest on technology and science and this kind of things to really deal with it in a very actually practical way? I believe this could be actually a solution that whole world, in my opinion, is suffering. But of course, in some cases, like in developed countries and those countries that they are exposed to this type of risks actually more. Of course, they have already developed some techniques, and yeah, they are trying to manage it actually better.
Okay, thank you, Professor Farzaneh, for very enlightened speech for us. Actually, the main theme of our talks is sustainability. You link sustainability with risk management and also sustainable risk management with the disaster management based on our very timely case in earthquakes in Turkey, and make it a very focused case on the hospitality and tourism sector. So we're really glad that you join us even under the conditions of your hectic schedule. I think we have also tested the resilience of Deutsche Bahn and its passengers within the train. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I wish you good luck with the research, and hopefully we will hear you about the same research when we, for example, after 6 months after the earthquakes, to understand how we are establishing our risk management systems in different business sectors, including hospitality and tourism. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure to have this speech in your Panorama, and I wish all of you success. And yeah, this sustainability talk should be sustainable, should stay sustainable. So I'm looking forward to join other sessions probably in the future. And thank you very much, and goodbye to all of you.
Thank you. Goodbye.